and welcome to Today in Woburn. I'm your host, Samantha Stone. We're going to start our show today talking with Phil Gordon, who is with Social Capital Inc. I'm super excited to talk to him about Juneteenth. And then we're going to take a deep dive into what's next with budgets, because we had a big meeting last night and lots of progress and decisions were made, and we want to make sure to share that with the community at large. So before we start talking money, let's talk about having a good time. Welcome, Phil.
Thanks, Jennifer. Samantha, thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you here with us today. I know that this year's Juneteenth is kind of a block party theme, which is super fun. Tell us a little bit about all the exciting things that will be happening.
Yeah, so we decided to pare it down and really emphasize the fun aspect of this. And there's some really great things happening inside the library too. But between 12 and 5 p.m., we're going to have music, we'll have community tables, we'll have vendors, as well as food available for people. That's going to be outside in the back parking lot of the library. And then inside the library at 12 p.m., there's going to be a little history lesson on the history of emancipation and the history of Juneteenth, from 12 to 1:30 for anyone who's interested in that. And then at 2 p.m. Outside, we'll have the Woburn Memorial High School step team, and this will be their third year performing at Juneteenth, which is really exciting. And then back inside the library at 2:30, there's going to be a Pan-Nubian steel pan trio. If you've never heard of that, it's a kind of traditional Caribbean American musical form.
That sounds so awesome. I'm super excited. The step team is a lot of fun to watch, and that music sounds fantastic. So I don't want to take away from the history session that will be happening at the library, but just as a very brief reminder for those who aren't as familiar with the newer holiday for us, Juneteenth, remind us why we are taking the time out to celebrate an important time in our history.
Yeah, so Juneteenth is a holiday that is now a federal holiday that recognizes the emancipation of enslaved African Americans, enslaved Black people in the United States, which actually started in 1866, even though emancipation happened in 1865. It did take a while for everybody to figure that out across the land. So it actually started in Galveston, Texas in 1866, and has been a holiday that has been celebrated and honored since then. So really excited that in the last few years that Woburn's embraced that with the recognition of it as a state holiday in 2020 and a federal holiday in 2021.
Well, we're so grateful for you and the work that SCI does and all the volunteers and groups that participate for helping us find really fun and educational ways to celebrate this time in our history. I can't wait to taste some yummy food and hear some great music. It's going to be an awesome time. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Samantha. Appreciate it. See you Saturday.
We'll see you Saturday.
Bye.
Mayor Concannon, thanks for joining me this morning. Today was a busy day in City Hall. We had Student Government Day.
Yeah, it was a great day, seeing all the high school students being department heads for the day. We had a great time with them.
Yeah, it was a really actually inspiring time. I, was in our downtime asking students what their projects were, and they had some really remarkable ideas. It was fantastic.
They really did. And part of the process involved those students interviewing members of city government over the last several weeks to further their projects and to better understand the issues and possible solutions to those issues. I had the opportunity to meet with several of those groups, probably 10 or so or more. And I was very much impressed with the caliber of the projects and the amount of work the students were putting into understanding issues, understanding the process, and trying to explore and identify possible solutions. And then I had the opportunity yesterday to go to their assembly and then to travel through the high school cafeteria where all the projects were set up. And it was amazing. I got to talk to even more of the kids to understand what their interests were and why they chose those particular topics. And I tell you, I was inspired and impressed by the work going on up there at the high school and the members of the junior class, what they're accomplishing. So I think as we said today at the luncheon, the future is bright. The future will be in good hands, civic-minded young people who are interested and excited to get involved in the process.
Yeah, I agree. It was really remarkable. I didn't get to speak to as many students in the process as you did, but I did have a few questions come my way, and they were really thoughtful and not necessarily easy to answer, which is great. It means people were asking the hard questions and thinking about complex solutions. So
yes, they were.
Excellent. Well, talking about complex, let's dive into budget. Last night there was a budget public hearing. The budget that you proposed was approved by City Council. For those who might not yet have tuned in or weren't able to make that meeting, it was a challenging budget. But I thought we could start our conversation today just talking a little bit about overall what you want residents to know about the process you went through in developing this budget.
Sure, and that is important. In a word, I'd describe the process as collaborative. Instead of simply receiving numbers and putting them together into an overall budget, we had meeting upon meeting with each of the department heads where we built their budget from the bottom up with their input to understand exactly what the needs were. And I'm very appreciative to everybody who participated. Obviously, the school budget is the biggest component of the overall city budget. So that's where we spent the bulk of our time. But we did also meet with each of the other department heads and gave them the opportunity to make the argument, make the case for their needs. And again, the idea is they're coming to us to tell us what they need to be able to serve the public. That's what we do here. We provide public service, police, fire, DPW, library. All of these entities exist to serve the residents of Woburn. And we've got department heads in place who understand those needs, they understand their mission, and they are committed to trying to provide the best services they can at a cost that is affordable to the residents. So the process called for many discussions where we weighed the pros and cons of adding money to the budget. Are there areas where we could save money in the budget? We went through an exhaustive process to understand exactly what was being asked and what could be delivered. As I said, the bulk of the time was spent with the school department. We met with representatives of the school department, the superintendent, the assistant superintendents, the finance director, as well as the chair of the school committee, in partnership with the city council president, week after week, since there was snow on the ground. And we spent every Wednesday afternoon for a couple of hours going line by line into their budget to understand how it is built and to understand why it is we need to spend that kind of money on those services. I was on the council for 10 years and I had a pretty good understanding of the overall budget and a pretty good understanding of the school budget, but it's much more comprehensive now, my understanding of all of that. And I'm appreciative of all the time that the school department spent with me and members of my team to understand that. That's why at the end of the day, I was confident putting that budget before the city council as the actual needs of the school department, the actual needs of the city. I understand that it's a significant increase. I just want the public to know that it was the product of a collaborative process and that it was demonstrated to my satisfaction that those needs were accurate and legitimate. That's why I felt confident bringing it before the council. I do understand the impact of that significant increase, but I also understand what it's comprised of. And I think it's important for people to understand that this isn't a wish list or a would like to have list for the school budget. This is a must-have list, a required list, a contractually obligated, state mandated, federal mandated, in some cases, requirements list. These are the things we must do to provide the level of education that is required. So I feel confident, and would suggest that the public should also feel confident that this is what we need to run our city for the upcoming year. And I understand that there's going to be an impact to the taxpayers. We're going to do everything we can in collaboration with the city council to mitigate and minimize that impact. But at the end of the day, the dollar amount that the city council approved last night at their public hearing is the dollar amount that's required to run the city of Woburn for FY25.
Thank you. One of the things that we know about the budget, as you've just described, and you've said in public meetings and city council reiterated as the department is it was bottoms up built, but not without scrutiny, and that we did not, in fact, fund everything that we would have liked to. There were hard decisions that had to be made by every single department head. I don't think there was a single department that didn't have difficult prioritization to do. Right. I thought it might be helpful for the community to hear just maybe a couple of examples of things that we were not able to do this year, understanding the impact of growing our budget and trying to be fiscally responsible.
Sure. And to that point, the process played out that led us to the proposal that was sent to the city council after we had already culled through and eliminated as much as we possibly could, while still allowing those departments to provide the services. And that goes for schools, police, fire, all the way down the line. Almost every department in the city of Woburn could use some more people to do their jobs the best they can and to provide the services that the residents deserve and require. There was some things like over at the library, they need a couple of more bodies, and they have identified the positions that would be in line with a typical library our size, serving a community our size, that we just weren't able to give them this year. We were able to provide a head reference librarian. There's also technology needs over there, and there's some general assistant needs that we just weren't able to provide this year. We worked with the library director to understand the priorities. We were able to meet the number one priority, but we weren't able to meet number 2 or 3. The hope is that next year we can try again. I appreciate the cooperation and the patience of the library director and her staff. That would be one example. The recreation department is basically a department of 2 for a community of 41,000 people. And I think the people in Woburn appreciate all the number of programs that the rec department runs. And again, it's 2 people doing it. There was a need and a request for another body there that we just weren't able to provide this time around. There were other departments as well, the DPW, the Parks Department. They could always use some more personnel to help execute the mission. But given the increase in 1 year and certainly the significant increase on the school side, we just felt that we had to be prudent, and we actually had to say no, not yet, not this year, in a number of instances. We know that we're going to revisit these issues next year. Same is true in police and fire and in the other large departments that we have. But again, at this point, given this budget, we think this was the prudent approach. What we've put in there is the necessary dollar amount, necessary number of employees to get the job done, acknowledging that they could certainly use more, and we'll continue to try to get them what they need to do their very best.
One of the things that was talked about in the meeting last night, and maybe even in previous meetings, was a process that we use, you use, called WUSTAT, and talked about a commitment from the school system to participate in that process with us next year. I've had the pleasure of sitting in those meetings. I learn a ton every time. I find it incredibly valuable in helping us perform as best we can, identify problems before they become out of control. All kinds of wonderful things come out of that. I thought it would be helpful for people to just understand what WUSTAT is and why you do that.
So CompStat is the foundation. It's used across the business world. It's used in government. It's used in not-for-profit organizations. It's really analyzing the data that helps you gauge the performance of the particular entity. There's a component that is financial. We track on a month-to-month basis where we are at that moment in time in terms of the budget we projected, whether the spending is on track to that budget. To your point, we get to identify early on if we're trending in the wrong direction to make corrections. It helps us build next year's budget because we get to see by month where we're spending. And then there's the other component, which is the performance metrics. Helps us determine whether we're actually meeting our mark in terms of our goals. Some of those goals are easier to define than others. Obviously, things like response time to a 911 call matters. We can do the math and understand how quickly our public safety entities get to these calls. That's an important metric. In terms of the schools, there are metrics that they're already using. We have graduation rates, we have absenteeism, we have MCAS scores, we have SAT scores. We have a lot of different ways to try to gauge how well we're meeting our mark. And we believe that it's helpful for each of the major city departments to participate in this process. Now, they were already looking at their numbers on their own, and we know that, and we appreciate that. But this is a way for the city to take a holistic view at all of its major departments. And for many years now, we've been working with police, fire, and DPW primarily. And we felt it was appropriate to invite the schools in, and we're very happy that they've agreed and committed to do that. We believe the collaborative effort that we started during the budget process, this is just a natural carryover throughout the year. There have been comments made, they were made again last night from members of the council that we should immediately begin looking at next year's budget today. And I agree with that. And that's what WooStat, which is what we call our version of ComStat, that's what it allows us to do, to begin looking at everything we're doing and tracking it closely and being prepared for next year's budget with no surprises and no gotchas at the end. What we've learned in WooStat over the last years, and for me, the last months, is that it's a way to make credible arguments on what the actual needs are and what the appropriate spending for those needs really is. So again, I'm excited that the schools have agreed to participate. I think they're going to find it extremely helpful. And I look forward to using WooStat to make all of city government more efficient and again, to avoid surprises late in the fiscal year.
Now, most of the discussion that has been happening has been about operational expenses, sort of the annual things that we do to operate. There's another big chunk of money that we as a city spend, which is on capital expenses, which are one-time things. We build a building, that's a capital expense. We buy equipment, that's a new fire truck, that's a capital expense. Mm-hmm. I thought we could just take a moment to talk a little bit about what's been happening with that budget and how it relates to what we've been doing on the operational side.
Yeah, to your point, there's actually a few different buckets. One would be operational. The second would be what we call the pay-as-you-go capital projects plan. And then there's the longer-term bonding, plan where we're going to build a new fire station, police station, water treatment plant, or a school. And at that point, we would go out to bond over 30 or possibly 40 years to pay that debt, to make it more manageable to handle that big expense. Usually something in the order of, $1 million or less, we would look at to fund through the capital pay-as-you-go plan. Operational is obviously the day-to-day, the salaries, the typical operating expenses, kind of like your checking account at home. Mm-hmm. And then the capital would be the savings account kind of things. You need a refrigerator, you go and buy that once every, hopefully 10 years or so. And then the long-term bonding plan would be more like a home equity loan or a mortgage. That's pretty much the way it works within city government as well. So we've got the operational budget for FY25 approved by the council. We begin setting that up now and giving each of the departments the line items and the amounts. And again, that's where WUSTAT comes in. We track those. And then the next step before the council right now is our proposed capital improvement plan, which comes about in a similar way to how we did the operating budget. We sit with each of the department heads. They propose what it is they need out of capital expenses for the next year. We have them lay it out over a 5-year plan, and then that 5-year plan just continues to evolve year to year. So for FY25, we've gone through their plan. We've identified the items that we think are the priorities, again, certainly with their input and their prioritization. And then we present that to the city council. Usually that's somewhere in the order of, $4 to $6 million that we'll spend in the pay as you go. Most of that money comes from the money that's left over from the current fiscal year operating expenses. Much like you do in your own home, you project how much money is going to come in, you project how much money you're going to spend, and you hope that there's a positive delta, a buffer. And with that buffer, we take that money and we usually fund the capital projects list. And as you mentioned earlier, that list is comprised by the department heads, and it ends up, being the things you'd expect. New fire trucks, new DPW trucks, new police cars, new lawnmowers for the parks department, minor improvements to buildings. It allows us to build skateboard parks and put lights at Rural Field, things like that.
Excellent. We've gotten to the point in the budget process where we know for certain there will be a bigger increase in property taxes than maybe we've had in our past. We don't yet know exactly what that is. We do have some estimates that are, grounded in what we know today, but we won't know for sure until December what those numbers are going to be. I thought it'd be helpful to just at a high level talk about what happens, why December, and what happens to that will allow us at that point to know for certain how much those property tax increases will be.
So a couple of things are happening. The operating budget was approved by the council, and now it basically gets sent to the state for certification. There's a review process to make sure that they agree that it's a sound budget based on, agreed upon industry standard financial standards. At the same time, the assessor's office is finishing up its work on the property values. That process takes a few months. It's usually sometime between late October and early December that the council will then review all that data. The assessor's office, the auditor's office, my office will sit down and propose what we believe to be the appropriate tax rate to raise the money we need to raise based on the approved budget. So that takes a few months for all of that to play out. So homeowners will get an estimated tax bill the first quarter into the second quarter. And then when the tax rate is officially set, the final 2 tax bills will be adjustments to collect the full amount. To your point about what might the anticipated tax increase be, based on historical data and based on the various pieces that make up the tax rate, the commercial assessments and the personal property assessments and the residential property assessments. What we've learned is that there's a rough estimate of approximately $40 to $45 added to your average residential tax bill for every $1 million that the annual budget goes up. That's a real short summary of it. There's a lot of variables that play into that, but that's essentially what it is. So in Woburn, the average residential house is valued at somewhere between $580 and $590. So if you did the math and you said, okay, $40 to $45, you know, per $1 million raised on that average property, that's the type of tax increase you might expect. I do caution people that these are estimates, and the real numbers will be the real numbers when they come in. We'll be transparent on that. Everyone will know. And, you know, we'll know that probably somewhere between late October, early December. And we'll share all that information, obviously, with the public as soon as we know it.
One of the other things that, in addition to taxes, residents pay fees for some things, not very many things, but you know, if you get a birth certificate, you some or need to. I actually don't know if we charge for birth certificates, so that might be a bad example. But there are things, your dog license, for example, you pay a fee for that. Do we anticipate any significant increases in fees across the city? I haven't really heard us talk too much about that.
There haven't been a lot of conversations about that. That would obviously be in conjunction with the city council. I do know that in a couple of areas within the building department, Woburn is lagging behind a little bit in some of the fees we charge for the permits. So we'll take a look at that. I know the council periodically looks at those type of fees to make sure that we're in line. We're not looking to be, you know, the top of the list, but I don't think we need to be the bottom of the list either. I think somewhere reasonably in the middle is where Woburn should be. So I'm sure we'll take a look at those. As you said, you know, Woburn doesn't historically charge a lot by way of fees, and we like that. We're proud of that. We just went through the school department budget process, and there was some discussion early on at the school committee level about whether it's time now to charge for buses and athletic fees and club fees and things like that some other communities do. And they made the decision that they did not want to take that approach. Again, in line with Woburn's history of being affordable and trying not to put additional costs onto the residents if we can avoid it at all.
Great. I really appreciate you digging in. One of the questions we've had a lot of is when the budget will be available online. I don't know that we know the date yet for that, but I know it won't be before July. We'll close out this year first, correct?
Yes, we are. You know, the budget was in process up until last night, and it was revised throughout that process. So I think now that we know it's final, we can share that as soon as practically possible, as soon as the information can be shared in a readable way. We will do that. And we could talk with the auditor and IT about the best ways to get that out there in a readable way that people can really understand it. So we'll get to that as soon as we possibly can.
Great, thank you. And for those who do want to see it in the meantime, it is in the rotunda at the city clerk's office, and someone has any special accommodations that are needed, if visual impairment or other things, to connect with the city clerk's office, and they'll be happy to work with you.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you for your time today, Mayor Concannon. I think this has been a really good and important discussion. We will continue to talk about the budget. We'll continue to talk about investments as a community. We know that there's big infrastructure projects and a whole task force working on school buildings as an example. Yep. And those things will continue to get community input and city council reviews and all kinds of things that will continue to happen as we progress throughout the year.
Right. And I would like to just reiterate my appreciation to everybody who participated in this process. It was different this year. I pledged that it would be more collaborative. I feel that we've done that. It wasn't without disagreements or, robust discussions. But at the end of the day, I think we have an operating budget that all involved can be confident in. And I do appreciate the hard work put in by the department heads, the school committee, the city council. I have to give a great shout out to our city auditor, Charlie Doherty, who is tremendous. He's sharp as a tack. He's got great judgment. He's got great historical knowledge. He's an invaluable member of the team, and I really appreciate everything that Charlie did throughout this process and every day. So to everyone involved, I say thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us and talking about this important topic. And Woburn, as always, please continue to take good care of each other.